You can have critical mass, you can have voices in the street, but action has to follow that.
Absolutely. I'm happy to see everything that's going on all around this country and all around the world, quite frankly, it's accurate to say. But we also have to make sure that we push through legislation to create changes. We need to make sure, for example, that we have data that actually uncovers the number of people who lose their lives at the hands of police every year. We need to make sure that when these things happen, that it's taken out of the hands of local prosecutors who clearly can't come at this from a neutral standpoint. Those and several other things need to change, and the only way that they do change is through legislation and through legal action.
This is not a singular issue, though. This is a symptom of a bigger problem. Black Lives Matter also needs to mean Black citizens matter. We are still second-class citizens in America. We are still treated as consumers that are taken for granted, voters that are taken for granted. So at some point in time, we have to expand this. This cannot just be about police interaction with African Americans. This has to be more about how African Americans are viewed and treated in the United States, which is why Chris Rock's article so eloquently goes to another symptom of the greater problem. We have to make sure that this moment addresses all of that, not just something that's symptomatic and not the actual illness.
But Kim, and we'll go to Pastor Brian next. Kim, when we talk about addressing all of that, it still has to be done in steps, because I think you can have a mass agenda, but any movement needs wins in order to keep people focused, to keep them involved, to keep them activated.
Oh, without a doubt. And ever since August 9th, when Mike Brown tragically lost his life in Ferguson, in my opinion, we have been seeing wins, because at first this was a Ferguson protest, and then it expanded across the country, and now we're seeing across the world. So that to me is a win, not only heightening the awareness, but heightening the level of engagement with people who are concerned about this issue. But to your point, Dr. Avis, some of that data is incomplete, because a lot of these police departments do not report annually, as they are mandated to the Department of Justice, how many people they shoot and kill on an annual basis, and those numbers need to be fully accounted for. We need to know how many people the police are harming and murdering every single year.
Well, Pastor Brian, on that particular point, when you begin to talk about these wins and begin to talk about these various initiatives, it still is vital to be able to walk through that and know who's working on what. Otherwise, you simply have chaos.
We have to have a meeting of the minds, and there's a false tension between generations, grassroots and old guard, and I think it's got to be the main point. It's amazing Dr. King and Malcolm X had two different ideologies, but they had one idea, and the idea was the liberation and the development of our people. It was just two different paths on how to get there. At this point, we cannot be what Shakespeare calls sounding brass and tinkling fury, but we have no point. And so there's got to be a round table that's without the cameras, without the press, but that we're able to get in the room and stay in the lane. People who don't stay in their lane always cause accidents. And so if Urban League does economic development, if the NAACP does law adjustment, if NAN does protests, if the black church is on the front line for mobilization, everybody has got to be on their lane so that we're not on the Seeper Highway crashing into one another.
And also, when you talk about these next steps, it also means realizing who does what, the role the federal government plays versus the state. The federal government cannot take over state prosecutions. To get a special prosecutor, you must change state law for that to happen. Well,
we've been operating in ignorance as bliss and turned it into a honeymoon of just turning legal jargon around to bend to a soundbite. And I think what is very critical is that we're going to have a remedial civics class to know what is the demarcation of where the feds can step in and where the state has got to be able to move forward. One of our dear panelists just said that we've got to be taken seriously. And one of the points to that has got to be an intensive for voter registration as we move towards this 2016 election. The Black American electorate single-handedly delivered the White House in 2008 and 2012. In 2016, we don't even have a prospect on the ticket. And so we cannot afford to allow our power and our strength to be taken for granted, both politically or economically.
All right, Pastor Brian, we surely appreciate it. Thank you so very much. All right, folks, when we come back, and we're going to talk about issue of race, but this time in Hollywood. Chris Rock really went there when he said Hollywood is a white industry. We'll explain when we come back 8 after the hour. This is News 1 Now on TV1.